In a certain respect, I took it as, either you get out of this or you die. My name is Khalil Ware, and I'm 30 years old, and I'm here to share my story of growing up in foster care and my experiences being homeless as an adult. I was born in Newark, New Jersey, which is an inner city in the U.S. I was born to two parents who were then addicts at the time. My mother growing up in a abusive household, and my father being absentee, basically from the very beginning. So, very dysfunctional from the get-go. Her family had issues with alcoholism, and she had a very dysfunctional family life, very abused, very traumatized, and she basically had children in the midst of all of that, and I was one of them. It was an interesting time, needless to say. How DYFS ended up getting involved was, as I mentioned, my parents were addicts, so that was one key factor. Can't really raise children if you're addicted to drugs, narcotics, and there came an incident when my grandmother her mother gave me a scar on my head and abused my brother and sister as well. And it was a pretty bad injury. So after that happened, it seems as though someone called, and myself, one of my older sisters, and my younger brother were taken away, and we were put in DYFS, and I was 2 years old at the time. So I started in all of this rather young. So from that point, even as a baby, there was no real permanence for homes. I believe at the time my mother was still working on trying to regain custody of myself and my siblings. Despite the fact that she was going through her issues, she still made effort, to rise to the effort and occasion, I suppose, to try to be a parent. But nevertheless, even during that time, homes weren't necessarily consistent. I remember staying in places for maybe a few years, but it usually didn't last very much longer than that. A lot of that changed when, at 6 years old, my mother ended up dying from an overdose. And due to that, that was the last person who could have reclaimed custody of myself and my siblings. And there were no homes available for us, and none of us were adopted. And so, given that, we became wards of the state, meaning that it was now up to the CPS New Jersey, DYFS at the time, to find placement for us, and that's how we were going to be taken care of, presumably. So, the gist of my childhood was very much me traveling from place to place, city to city. I ended up being one of those children who never really found a place to live. So, I was born in Newark, but by the time I'd hit like 21 or so, I traveled already to like Union and like Gloucester County. And for reference, that's entire different sections of the state. So north, south, etc., going back and forth. So, that definitely interrupted any sense of normalcy I could have aspired for. So I usually wasn't in schools for too long. I went to like 7 different high schools, for an example. And even my graduating from high school was just kind of a flimsy occasion. I just had to take a test, and I just so happened to graduate at whatever school was available at the time versus anything substantial, because of the fact that my education kept getting interrupted. Added with that, the most important thing I would say would easily have to be the effect it took on my trying to form relationships, my apologies, with people in very easily in my emotional development. So, for instance, I was a very angry child while growing up. I was very confused about my situation. I was very upset about it. I was sad about it, even though at times I didn't fully realize that. And again, it would manifest itself in anger. I couldn't really find myself getting closer to people despite the fact that I would want to. I really didn't know how to necessarily be loved. I didn't really have self-esteem either. I had no real bonds that I could really depend on when it came to people. So that was like a huge test of my life, and it was definitely the most challenging section, because as I became an adult, it made forming relationships, be they romantic, friendships, or otherwise. In retrospect, they usually didn't go very well. I had trouble maintaining healthy friendships because of it. I didn't know what it was like. I had a lot of things that I still needed to sort out with myself, but I simply didn't realize that, and it kept showing up in ways in which I would react and interact with people. And again, that came from a lifetime of not really being all that familiar with people. I would meet people along the way, but it would still be kind of fleeting. And half the time I would move so far away that I would probably never usually see some of those people again. Thankfully, I do have some people in my life now who have basically stood the test of time in all my travels, but it wasn't always the case. And there was a part of me that was always rather, I feel like, sad and embittered about that. I really wanted to, become close to people. Given that I, didn't grow up with like parents, it also formed this weird disconnect on like, how I saw like authority, but also developing any kind of love that felt paternal or familial. I didn't know how to be a part of a family. I didn't know what that specific kind of love felt like. As an extra layer to that, there came a point when I actually met my father all over again, much later, about like 18 or so. The same guy who wasn't there from the get-go, and I meet him all over again. I'm pretty excited to see him and things like that. And turns out he's not even all that great a person. He never wanted to be a father, it would seem, and it was very easy for him to choose not to be in the picture. That was just an easy choice for him. Even when I, thought I could get close to the one, living parent that I really thought that I could possibly connect with, turns out he's not that great. And, to this day, he still doesn't understand why I'm upset with him. Needless to say, you grow up in foster care, you hear the stories and read them in like newspapers, and you see them on the internet, about kids being abused and things like that. And that was definitely the case for me on more than a few occasions. I had more than a few people do their fair share of damage, emotionally, definitely physically. I used to live with one lady who just could not keep her hands to herself, ran away from her like more than a few times. Last time I ran away from her, she's like punching me in the face the entire car ride back. And basically, from what I can even understand now, she was basically just mad because I inconvenienced her because she had to go pick me up from a long distance. Stuff like that. And of course, some people who just aren't, really emotionally kind, who would take advantage, who would, harm me and things like that. To, keep the foster care participant, lots of traveling, abusive stories along the way, lots of running away, lots of abandonment, lots of emotional damage as well. That, brings me forward to, I would say, my young adults in my 20s or so. So as far as, what led to homelessness, I was 19 at the time. I was still traveling to independent living placements. Basically, they're for foster children who are attempting to transition into adulthood. So take some kids like 18 or 19, you have them in kind of sort of pseudo apartment setting, usually supervised or whatnot. And it's to help them have some type of stable footing before they become an adult. And so that didn't work out for me even. And I ended up going back to an old foster parent. I asked her, hey, I don't really have any place to stay. May I come back in this time? And I was still going to community college. So, she let me come back, and this was back down in Newark. I still had to commute from, that place all the way up to my community college, which was just like an hour and some change out. Because of that, I would end up coming back late sometimes, and there were a few times when I ended up coming back a little later than normal because, I had friends who were still out near my community college. And one particular night, she really got upset about this. Prior to that, I know that we'd had some disagreements, but nothing so severe as to cause her to reaction, when I came back late this particular night. And she was just like, you just gotta go. And I don't even recall what my reaction was at that time, but I'm fairly certain I was stunned, and I didn't even think of who I could call or even where to go. So I just started looking through my then phone, started looking up, numbers of people I could possibly ask. I found a friend, but, it was as simple as that. Hey, you gotta go. And so I called my friend. He came to me, picked me up all the way down in Newark. And that was, in fact, the beginning of my being homeless that night when I had left. As far as the homelessness went, that went on from, like I mentioned, 19 up until roughly 26. So up until roughly 4 years ago for me. It was one of the most just emotionally devastating experiences for me. I hated everything about it for the most part, despite the fact I was trying to always keep up my appearances and keep up good spirits and just think of something. I hated the fact that I didn't have a steady job. I didn't have an apartment. I didn't feel like an adult. I felt like a failure in every single respect. You know, I came from foster care and I was so adamant in a lot of ways to make sure that at least my adult life could turn out just fine. I have to make something out of that. I can't just go through these types of experiences, you know, as a kid and then, you know, just have that happen for nothing. I don't want to end up being just another product of that and just go nowhere. And by being homeless, I felt like that I'd become exactly that. I ended up, you know, coming from slowly losing a job that I'd gotten at like, you know, 21, thankfully from a connection. And, you know, I was still homeless at that point. And I kept that job steady for a bit, but that didn't pan out either. My work ethic was not up to par for a 21-year-old, and I was irresponsible about that one. And eventually I was let go. I ended up having to move out of my apartment, and then, you know, everything just kind of came crashing down from there. I did have a girlfriend at the time, and for a while she did stick around, you know, while I was going through all of that, but even that came to an end for a multitude of reasons, not even necessarily coming down to my predicament as much as what kind of person I'd started to become because of it. A lot of those internal grievances just kept showing up on the outside. Really refusing help, being very stubborn about things, being very selfish, not really listening all that well, and in my own way, kind of sabotaging and pushing her away. So I still, of course, you know, cared and loved her, but at the same time, it was just like, how could you even want me for this? I didn't even feel good enough. I was supposed to be better than that. You know, you have everything, you know, good going on in your life. I wanted to be able to match that somehow. So I'm fairly certain on some level that was definitely sabotage. The entire experience ruined a lot of things that I would have hoped could have gone better at that time. I just wanted things to get better so bad. I just wanted to succeed. I wanted to prove that for everything that I went through, that I was a survivor, that for everything I went through, that I could also be one of those people who could become better in their circumstances. Yet here I was in homeless shelters. Here I was going to food banks. Here I was lacking stability. You know, here I was out in the streets. You know, here I was sleeping in train stations. It was miserable. I was definitely miserable during that time. I had no idea when it was ever going to end. It was always cold. I didn't really have anyone I could ask. You know, that compounded that, you know, imagine what it's like during the holidays. Everyone else gets to go home. And every so often, of course, I would see people that I know, and some friends would aid me and things like that. Of course, none of it was necessarily permanent. It was something I would, needless to say, I would never go back to. I'm glad, if nothing else, that I got out of it. And I've definitely grown from it too. Yet, at the very beginning of me kind of getting my life together, at least as far as I can tell where it is now, all I could think of and all I could really focus on is just don't go back there. It really had its own effect on me. I guess that would be considered a trauma in its own respect as well. I felt like outside of society as well, you know, people will tend to judge you and things like that. But again, I tried to make sure I kept up my appearances. I didn't want to be judged even worse than I kind of figured I was already going to be anyway. You know, and any challenges I faced, well, mostly it was like emotional and mental. And being able to ask for help, knowing who I could trust and things like that. Trying to keep my head straight, seeing if I can make any reasonable, rational decisions. Yeah, there was a lot of challenges. In a certain respect, I took it as, you know, either you get out of this or you die. I guess that's the challenge I ultimately, you know, made myself face about it. Well, and the worst parts about it, one of them easily had to have been the relationship that I lost. Like, I really cared for this woman that I'd grown fond of. Having lost that because of it, because of who I'd become, because of the depression becoming at the forefront, and in its own way poisoning the well, because of everything else that interfered with us even being able to have a functional relationship whatsoever. Things primarily on my end, and then the things I projected onto her, and, you know, my issues became her issues, and I was selfish about it. That one really stuck out to me, you know. And yeah. And daily life, it was like this weird, surreal, depressive haze. I was pretending to be happy, and I was just trying my best to keep like a real basic survivalist mentality, and just focusing on just keeping alive and focusing on keeping my head up and things like that. And just wondering, what am I supposed to do? Is this forever? And where do I go? What can I ever do? What do I need? Constant thinking. And wondering how I was going to survive, wondering how I was going to eat regularly, and just trying my best to look forward to something, some kind of sign that things were going to change eventually, hoping I could make it through on the other side of it any better. What was going through my mind during it? When will this end? What could I have done better? That was always a question. Did I deserve it? Am I dumb? Did I just make all the wrong decisions? Am I a bad person? A mix between encouragement and very self-defeating thoughts. I felt very stuck and powerless. It took a lot, even after I'd ended up being stable, to get out of that frame of mind of living day to day and trying to scrounge every little thing that I possessed and things like that. I'd become so, tense and so used to just looking over my shoulder just to, make sure I'm keeping my things intact and making sure no one's trying to take anything from me or hurt me. A combination of foster care and the homelessness, I can definitely say, bred that. As far as how I got out of it, so it was funny because I was born in Newark, New Jersey. That's where everything started, and I'd moved away from it constantly in childhood and my adulthood. I'd gone through fits of hating home because of everything it represented for me. Sometimes I would come back and think to myself, it just feels like a bubble. I don't want to be here. It feels like a jail or something. To coming back and like, I kind of miss my city, like feeling like, back home kind of deal. After a few years, I think I was roughly like 25 at that point. I'd come from a 2-month stay in PA with a then friend of mine. Things just didn't work out. We had an incident, and our friendship basically fell apart after that. And I, packed up my things. I'll just go back to Newark. It's fine. I don't know what's gonna happen when I get back down there because I had no one to call. I had no other resources. I had no money. Took what little bit I had left, got a Greyhound back, and ended up in Penn Station. And I just slept in a specific waiting terminal in Penn Station for a few months. And that, lasted through parts of the winter, and I just carried all my stuff everywhere. And it was from there that I ended up meeting this random guy while I was in a train station, a younger dude. And we ended up talking about video games of all things while we were still waiting in the same terminal. So we talked up until early morning. The next day, he's all like, hey, I'm going to my community college. I have some friends there. You want to hang out? And I was just like, hey, I don't have anything to do. I don't have anywhere to go. Sure, I'm down. I went over to the community college. I ended up meeting some of his friends. From that moment on, that's what ended up branching out into me getting to where I am right now. From my meeting the set of people that I met there, I met a close friend of mine who I'm currently roommates with now even, who ended up feeding me and helping me survive throughout all that time. That then in turn, led me to networking with some of her family members who let me stay with them for a brief time. And then, I ended up reacquainting with some old friends I'd met before who still lived down in Newark, and they found out about my situation, and then they started to let me stay with them for a bit. So in short, I ended up somehow networking way better than I had before living in Newark, and I ended up getting a short-term job. I met my other roommates at their former job, and while I was still just out there traveling, I was actually looking for an apartment. I was working at a Trader Joe's at the time, so I figured, let me pivot from this point. Let me start looking for a place. So it just so happens on, one particular Saturday, my current roommate calls me and says like, hey, I have a place, an extra room in this apartment. Some of my roommates gonna be moving out pretty soon. If you know anyone who's looking for a room, hey, please let me know. Needless to say, I'm just like, oh, hey, I know a guy who may or may not need an apartment. Hey, that guy is me. And so after a bit of talking, I basically told her, search no more. The apartment is mine. I'll see you in a few. I will have the money I need, and I appreciate the opportunity. And it did, in fact, go exactly like that. And I ended up moving into the place that I currently am in now. It was a very weird time. I didn't even believe that it even happened like that. And I was so excited. I just immediately, took us like, yo, I didn't even need to look for this. This kind of just came to me. It was very weird that it happened at a time where that very same week, I just so happened to just mention to myself, this is finally time that I need to double down on, all my job stuff, get my ducks in a row. I need to get a place. I need to start building up on something. And then later that same week that happened. And so yeah, that, again, that's how I ended up here. And to give a second part of the mental and emotional journey, I hope some people will be able to resonate with this, even if they haven't necessarily grown up the way in which I have. But getting used to like stability, getting used to the fact that people are consistent, getting used to people who are constantly there, getting used to people who actually you could take their word at face value. That is a very wild thing to become adjusted to after having none of that for near like 30 years. So even me moving into this apartment, I've been here for roughly 4 years, I think, at this point. It was a very, very tumultuous experience attempting to adjust to the fact that I was actually living around other people. And given my upbringing, I never knew how much I wasn't acclimated to that. It really sank in when I found that I was like really uncomfortable and insecure and having weird, like just kind of projected feelings and distance, you know, from just them trying to like do basic interactions and having constant anxiety about it. I got better after much trial, error, and lots of mistakes. I've made it past that, and now I'm actually adjusted a bit more, and you know, people aren't so bad, it turns out. Go figure. Who knew? So I'm just gonna go on to some of the other questions that were here. So one of them is, what would I tell my younger self? Please wait, please hope it does actually get better at some point. Please be more patient. Try to keep a few more people closer to you. I know that people are scary, but they're nice. They can be nice. It's okay. I would give myself a lot of kind and comforting words. I needed a lot of kind and comforting words. I took on a lot of burden and responsibility about my situation because I didn't have anyone else to blame or any other kind of outlet. You know, no one's gonna do anything about it. I gotta do something about it. I gotta do everything. And I took on a lot of stress on not being able to get everything right when all in all, I could have really used a lot more people telling me, hey, it's okay that you can't do all of this. It's okay that you've gone through this. I needed that. As far as my attitude about life now, less dismal, less polarized. Initially, I had very, very black and white views. There were seldom gray areas to me. I categorized people horribly. I really couldn't find myself wanting to be bothered to hear people further than a point in which I could assume their identity and their intentions by a certain kind of bullet point I had in my head. Primarily for the sake, I guess, of protecting myself in a certain extent. Weird shielding thing, you know? I don't want to take any chances with anything I don't know. But overall, I've improved a lot. I actually believe in myself a bit more now. I have a lot more self-esteem. I had none of that growing up. I didn't really receive a lot of encouragement. And after a while, I started meeting people who really, really took to me very, very thoroughly, very, very intensely. And I didn't know how to handle that. But because of them sincerely just liking who I was as a person, as I was, even no matter what I thought about myself, that helped me bolster my opinion on how I could go about things. That helped me bolster my opinion about myself. And, you know, eventually those things started to become my thoughts, and I started to internalize that and really started to appreciate myself a lot better than I could ever say that I did in my teenage years, especially my early adult years. Oh man, a lot braver too, definitely a lot braver. And, you know, I found that I was always a very kind person, but I can definitely say after everything, that kindness is definitely amplified, hence my even doing this. You know, on the most basic level, I sincerely hope that me sharing any of this can help somebody else feel understood about something that they're going through. Maybe hearing this helps resonate with somebody, anything. Maybe they can feel some empathy, something, especially in times like this. That's who I am, and because of that, it definitely left me a lot more critical of not necessarily judging people, especially people who come from destitute situations and things like that. You know, I find there's a lot of stigma about homelessness, obviously, but for me, given I've been there, it's like, no, I know one of these people have gone through. It's not as much as you think on the surface, you know. And do I feel let down by the system? What was not enough done? In a lot of ways. Like, there could have been better screening for like a lot of the foster parents and places that I went. I mean, there were like, you know, group homes that I went to where the staff that they hired, they should not have been in that field, or certain caseworkers or managers who were, you know, in charge of my case or something, who just didn't need to be in a field like that. It's not to say I don't understand that jobs like that become stressing or anything like that, but that's a risk that I would assume one could understand. It's people involved. And a lot of those people really took advantage or abused their position to hurt the kids that they were supposedly working for. And it became very evident that many of them weren't really doing it for altruistic means. You could, after a while of living through that, you could see through those people very thoroughly. And yeah, that was definitely a letdown, if anything, that people like that were still getting through any kind of screening, because there are too many kids who get hurt by these organizations who just want a bunch of kids there just to keep a profit or something like that. And all in all, the treatment and of is just terrible. And these kids hate it here, but they get stuck there because they literally can't go anywhere else. And then what? And then, you know, when they're mad or upset about their situation, they take it out at the place, most likely at the people. But half the time, some of them won't even want to be bothered to sit down with that kid and understand that. No, it just becomes a fact about punishment and things like that. It's like, oh, great. So, you know, you treat us like crap, and then now we're mad about it, and then you're going to punish us for it. That's real fair. And that was a relatively common thing, depending on where I went, unfortunately. So, yeah, in certain ways I was let down. In certain things, absolutely could have been done better. Definitely. Absolutely. As for how I was treated when I was homeless, it was a mixed bag. I mean, like I said, I kept up my appearances. I, at the very least, you know, made sure to try to shower whenever I could, things like that. I didn't want to, like, become so destitute that, you know, I just let myself fall apart, because I did kind of feel as though if I did that, it's just going to become a slippery slope, and I didn't want to do anything to put myself at a greater detriment. I didn't want to be any actual literal further cause of that. Some people felt as though I wasn't trying hard enough. Some people understood. Lots of people helped. Some people would, of course, judge me for it. And some people just weren't understanding, and that's fine too. But again, they've never been there. Here's one I was really adamant to answer: the common misconceptions about homeless people. So, as I'm sure anyone could tell, you know, if you watch this, I'm rather chatty. I'm a reasonably talkative person. So even while I'm homeless, I would in fact talk to the people that I met on my journey there. The most common misconception is like, oh, you know, these people did it to themselves. Oh, these people aren't trying hard enough. These are just the dredges of society. They're not doing enough. They let themselves get here. You know, it's X, Y, and Z. It's literally all their fault. They just didn't do anything about it. I've heard stories of a guy who ended up going to jail because his baby was killed by a babysitter at the time who shook them to death, and then fled to whatever country that they had come from. And his life basically fell apart after that. And he ended up in jail for roughly 13 years for a crime. His wife left him and things like that. You know, from that event, he spiraled. That's how someone like that can end up destitute. And, you know, I ended up talking to him inside of a homeless shelter. There was another guy who was roaming around the town I was in, who was this, you know, unfortunately very slovenly man, you know, clearly very strung out. I learned from word of mouth, you know, he was a firefighter over in, you know, in the city that was 2 towns over. There was a fire at a house, and yes, it was his house with his wife and his kids. They died in that fire, and of course, he wasn't there to be able to do a thing about it, and he basically fell apart after that too. There's another bit about the fact that mental health and how it's handled in America from God knows how long to today. Mental health has never been handled well, and a lot of people who are homeless do in fact have mental health issues and are usually abandoned by family members because they're too taxing to care for, or they may not have the resources to handle whatever their condition may be, and they end out on the streets. That's an example right there. People going broke because of financial issues that may or may not be out of their control, anything like that. But again, any person who would try to look at these people at surface, you know, level would think, oh, you know, clearly they just, you know, have no willpower. You know, they're just not good people. You know, they want to stay like this. It's not the case. Like, they're human. Things led up to that. Their experiences and their very presence didn't form in a vacuum. They didn't just poof out of nowhere and boom, they just exist as this person you see right here. Things happen. I just so happen to be privy to some of those stories, and they're heartbreaking. They're hard. So if more people knew about the fact that these things happen, of a lot of the systems that go on in America, as in, you know, mental health and social services, were revamped all around in a way in which they would actually do as they're intended, while not at a deficit of anyone or without any bureaucracy to make it hard to get to these resources. You know, a lot of these people probably wouldn't even be in this situation. And what would I say to a homeless person? Like, you know, hey, I'm sorry you've been there. You know, here's something for anything. I still, you know, give money or things like that to people I see. I show them respect. I don't try to ignore them or anything like that, because they're people. They don't just disappear, you know. I didn't want to be treated like that, so I don't want to treat anyone else like that. And truth about drugs, alcohol addiction, and how it relates to homelessness. Well, the most simple truth is that it's simply not always the case. Not every homeless person is an addict, for instance. Not every homeless person has any kind of addiction. Some of them may be in the midst of transitioning something better. Every one of them at a different chapter in their life, and not every story, is going to end up just, some guy strung out at in an alley somewhere. It's a factor, but there's also, a whole bunch of things that go into that. How do they end up strung out? How do they end up being an alcoholic? Things of that sort. And then, of course, the presumed laziness. I find that a lot of people have a really hard time recalling moments that they've been in a state of sorrow or hopelessness to a point where it affects their mental, where they feel like they can't do anything. Take those moments that you may or may not have gotten past and then recognize that those people who are out there, especially those who are addicts, are most likely living that every single day. I don't just think of them as people who just simply make poor choices to make poor choices. That's not as simple as laziness. For addicts, they most likely are trying to hide from something, probably themselves, probably an experience, and unfortunately, the worst kind of coping methods got to them first. That was what was available to them. That's what made whatever was hurting them stop the fastest. They gave in. They couldn't take it, whatever that is. And I don't want to judge anyone for that. I've been in that place. And how am I now? I'm okay now. I'm definitely a lot better. Way more reasonable than I ever was. A lot more emotionally stable, and I'm still working at that. I have a bit more foresight about a lot of things. My perspective about life clearly has changed. I don't feel this overwhelming sense of despair. I don't feel like I need to watch my back so much. I've opened up to people, which I never really thought I could do. And at this point in my life, right about now, I'm at 30, I'm making it a point to be a lot better in myself, and even my doing this is a part of that. I never really took the chance to, like me as much as I think that I could have. And now I'm making it a point to do that. I'm sort of recognize, okay, I don't need to just be thinking about, all right, do I need to be worried about running away anytime soon? I don't know, I can relax. I can now take time to plan and to build up on things. I was never really privy to that. So that's something that I've been learning to take advantage of. And how can anyone help the homeless problem? Don't assume. Give to organizations, I would assume, definitely give to charity. Study up on what goes into mental health. Study up what goes into addiction. Study up what goes into classism. Study up what goes into welfare. Study up what goes into poverty at all, and especially how that affects, people here. Become more aware of it, and become more aware of where exactly you can use whatever power you have to improve on that. Better education for people growing up in poor neighborhoods, or those who lack access to better education at all. Resources is definitely a thing. It's awareness, empathy, and being open-minded about the fact that this can change, and being reminded of the fact that just because it is this way, it doesn't have to, and it never had to in the first place. And that it can be changed if people are willing to see it as something that can be at all. No kidding, the entirety of the American government we need to change. From how jail is handled, from how issues with poverty have been handled and how those developed. Again, I bring up education because that's very, 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 very important. The more people know, the more a person knows, the better that they can possibly face and manage the problems in their life. And a lot of these people end up in these situations usually are at a lack of resources or at a lack of some type of knowledge that could have helped them, but they just weren't privy to it. They just didn't have access to it. Making these things accessible, not assuming that poor people just want to be poor. As far as the kids and children in foster care, definitely, for the love of God, screen the parents better. We do not need to have kids going into these places with people who most likely actually don't want them, with people who won't know how to handle perhaps an emotionally hostile kid. Being able to train them a little better and really talk to them and really make sure that, whomever this person is really in this for all the right reasons. For the organizations that work with, the likes of DYFS and non-for-profits and things like that, making sure the people who are in charge of them have no ulterior motives as to why they have this business open in the first place, you know, not necessarily doing it for profit and things like that. And again, making sure the people who work in these organizations and work in these placements in these homes and things like that, that every last one of them are at least half decent people who won't try to, you know, abuse the kid emotionally or otherwise who's already in a vulnerable situation. And no, nothing's perfect, but as from my experience, a lot better could have been done as far as a hiring process is concerned. Place in Phillipsburg I used to live, terrible. One lady would really literally tease all the kids there and things like that and belittle us and all that sort. It was terrible. And why would you want somebody like that in charge of a bunch of kids who are already in an emotionally vulnerable state? They don't have anywhere to go. They're disconnected from their families. There's probably a lot going on under their surface, and then these people who are supposed to like be looking after them are also making, you know, the situation worse. The people who get involved definitely need to be the right people. And my biggest lessons, to not sound too cliche, that people aren't so bad, that I'm a good person too, that, you know, I'm worth like love, I'm worth something, I deserve things, I deserve to be treated kindly, you know, I'm worth any friendship given to me. I really was never in a state of mind where I feel like I do about myself right about now and where I am in life. Definitely my sense of empathy goes to the roof half of the time. I've been in so many different placements and been in so many different hats in life, different jobs and stuff like that. Tried out so many different things that I typically empathize in a lot of different areas. And that in turn has led me to really look at things, you know, different perspective. I'll go to like a supermarket or something like that, and, you know, just as a small example, I turn my carts in every single time because I used to work at a freaking Trader Joe's, and no one likes to put the carts back, and it's terrible and it's hot outside. Little things like that. Given my experiences, it allows me to, under normal circumstances, to be able to grant people a greater sense of validation about, you know, what they are in life and who they are as people. You know, if something happens, I'm now thinking with a lot more emotional intelligence about it. That was a huge takeaway, because initially I couldn't do that. Now, because of, you know, all my accumulated experiences, like, you know, that person was like so and so, but, you know, I think I can understand how that it could probably let them react like that, things of that sort. I'm a lot more capable than I thought that I ever really was, and I never really believed that. I always felt really powerless in my situation because it always felt like someone else was making the decisions for me. It always felt as though someone else got to determine how I went about things. I didn't think I could handle it because it seemed really overwhelming, and I'm still learning a lot of things, but I'm more capable than my life kind of led me to believe. And needless to say, I also hope that this can help someone. You know, I hope that someone can resonate with anything that I'm saying. I hope that my doing this does some type of good, in short. And thank you very much for even having me. I'm honored to even take a part of it. And in the meantime, for whomever, please take care. And for what it's worth, things can get better, all things considered. Just hold out a little bit of hope, even a little bit. That's all you gotta give yourself. That's it.